Welcome to the Cookies and Coffee podcast. My name is Cale Owen.
And my name is Maggie Owen. I am the VP of Operations and Cale is the CEO. And together we run 2 8-figure businesses and we are in the middle of building a startup.
And this podcast is to document our journey as high-level executives, as parents, and as husband and wife, so that we can share what's working for us, what we found that doesn't work, lessons, tips, and tricks, so that if you are married and working together or want to do that, you can learn from what has worked for us and for many other people so that you can have an incredible marriage, an incredible business, and an incredible life. Welcome back to the podcast. Super stoked for today. It's going to be a great one. It's going to be awesome. Today, we're talking about how do we keep ourselves from going crazy while running multiple companies, even though there are quite a few days where we feel like we are going crazy. So we're going to get super tactical in this today, talk about some things that we use, the project management systems that we use, as well as how we utilize our EA to help manage our schedules and get into that. So for context, I'm the CEO of a portfolio of companies. Maggie is VP of Operations, so kind of 1 and 2. And we manage a consulting company on the gym side. We manage a supplement company. And then we also have a startup, a tech startup. And they're majority owned by a private equity firm out of California. And it is our job to grow and scale these and work with our teams. We have a team of counting 1099s and everyone else, we have slightly over 70, or we're around 69, 70 employees. Yeah, our clients, our employees.
Yeah.
And so our goal is obviously working with our teams, managing them. But how do we do that while managing multiple companies? Because each one is in its own different area, different bucket, different industry. Even though they're all working with gyms primarily and fitness related, they're all in their own little kind of vertical section.
Yeah.
So.
And then we have we have some shared resources like HR, IT, ops is shared, but everything else has its own team specifically focused on each of those entities.
It might be helpful to talk about the org chart real quick, and I can kind of talk about how we set that up and then how we'll set that up continually as we build, but then then the next level of organization and then how it works. So at the top, we have an executive team. That is what I'm building a kind of like centers of excellence. And within those, we have Maggie and myself. And then we have a CFO who is a shared resource across all of the companies. We have a CTO who is primarily focused on the gymowners.com side, which is our tech startup. However, he's also a shared resource for bigger projects across all of them, even though right now his main focus is obviously building our CRM that we're building. Then we have the general managers per se, kind of the leaders, the heads of each of the other entities. So we have a GM, Mike, who is the GM of Gym Launch. And then we had a head of growth for Prestige Labs.
Yeah.
And that's Ed. Now, as we grow and we build, we'll most likely bring on basically a CMO who will then be the head of all marketing for all of the entities across the board and manage the individual teams or shared resources across all of them. And potentially we'll have a human resource style person at the head as well. At the top, because I think it's really important. And we may end up having a VP of sales or a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer, someone who is head of the sales organizations across all of them.
Yeah.
That maybe depends on how big we get.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, we're really fortunate enough with APG, the private equity company that owns majority of the portfolio. They kind of have their own centers of excellence within their portfolio, which is really great and useful for us because we can plug in if we need someone for help, let's say on the Prestige Lab side with supply chain management, vendors, supplies, shipping, 3PLs, anything like that. Like they have a center of excellence that can help with giving you contacts to get either like better rates, or if we need to change our 3PL, or we need to, work through, supply chain issues, whatever it might be, they have someone that they were able to plug in and help us navigate that because we don't have expertise there, which is really great to have someone with that kind of knowledge that was able to come in and help kind of guide us, get us up to speed where we needed to be on like regulatory and compliance. Like that was a really big thing too. Like things like when you start a business and you get going, you don't even really think of. And then once you get going and you get to a certain revenue level, it's like, these are things that you have to keep top of mind. Otherwise, these are things that can tank your business.
Yeah.
From the inside, like outside factors that you don't even really realize that can take your business. And I think that's been really helpful for us to have that. And so think just like navigating what resources do they have that they can help us with, because they're really open to meeting with people on our team. Like we don't even have to be a middleman. Like they just come in and almost like insert themselves into our business to help guide the employees, get us to where we need to be. And then they just kind of step out once they leave us in a place where they think we have, you know, enough knowledge or like help put a system in place. Which I think has been really helpful, because even when we didn't have it, our old CFO left and exited the company, went with acquisition.com. And
when
so
we were purchased.
when we were purchased. So we had to have an interim CFO, and they had one, which was great. So they were able to plug her in, help us get a new CFO to bring in full time, which was really helpful. And so I think it's just something that we also keep top of mind to make sure we are managing our resources as effectively as possible. Is like, what do they have that we can leverage versus what do we have to bring internally to bring onto the payroll ourselves?
Yeah, because our goal is to keep EBITDA as high as possible.
Yep.
And minimize costs, which is really key. And then the other aspect of like, they're called operating partners, and like an operating partner, one of them, they just brought in a new person on the sales side, which is really cool. So they can work directly with our director of sales on the GL side and help us a ton. And he helped orchestrate a lot of what we've done on the PL side when it comes to affiliate tiers and creating more incentives for our affiliates to be able to make more, as well as have access to more information.
Yep.
But so we have the exec team at the top. And then underneath we have strategic teams. So the strategic teams they're shared services across. So when you think of shared services, it's going to be IT, finance, and HR and legal. Like those are the shared services. And we outsource our legal to firms that are associated with APG that they've let us know. And so we use those firms when we have. And I think we still have one that we still work with from before.
Yeah.
But so at the strategic level, we've got directors and some managers, but primarily directors of certain aspects of the business, divisions of the business.
Yep.
And they are at the strat level, and they come and meet with us for our strat meetings quarterly. And then we have strategic meetings every week.
Yep.
And then underneath.
And those are split up per entity. So we have a strategic team for each one of the businesses.
Yeah. So our Mondays are pretty busy. Like Mondays are when we have our meetings. So we have our exec meeting at 10 a.m. Then at 11 a.m. we have our gymowners.com for an hour, our strat meeting.
Yep.
Then we have our strategic meeting at noon with GL.
Yep.
Then at 1 o'clock, we have our PL strat meeting. And then you have any other ancillary, like I do weekly meetings on like a marketing meeting for gymowners.com. Right now we're getting prepped for GymCon. So we have a GymCon meeting set in on Mondays. And then sometimes I'll do like an advertising meeting with our agency that runs our ads on the GL side.
Yep.
And then any other meetings, but Monday is slammed with those. And then we usually spend the morning, some parts of the morning, either hopping on a meeting or you and I getting together and talking about like what's going to happen for that week. So organizing those is really key first to kind of stay on top of everything. But the more important thing to stay on top of everything is to use the right systems. And I know for myself, like I'm just now in the last like month diving into our project management system, which is Asana.
Yep.
And I've heard a lot of people not liking Asana, but there's also a ton of people that love Asana. It's one of the most widely used project management systems in the world, along with there's like Monday and there's like a whole bunch of different ones that you can use, but we use Asana. And Asana is really the thing that keeps me now focused on being able to have clarity on every project that's moving forward in the business. We track all of our goals, our quarterly goals. We track all of our yearly goals inside of Asana per entity. So they each have their own board. And then we review those boards on our strat meetings. We review any subtasks that need to happen, any projects that are open, any tasks that are open. But we use that as a way for us to be able to maintain clarity and kind of oversight on what's happening.
Yep.
And if we didn't have that, like in the past, like I would just use Slack. So I'd be like, hey, where are we at with this? Problem with that though, is that if you're trying to move a project forward and you're talking about any tactical or project-based things inside of Slack, it gets forgotten. And then what we noticed is that things weren't moving forward. And so I was making the assumption, cool, go do this in Slack there. But then there was no deadline. There was nothing set. And it's always the basics. And so when we moved everything back into Asana, at least for me, moving it back into Asana, it made everything a lot easier to maintain.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of times too with Slack. Usually sometimes it's one to a few, like a group Slack, but most of the time it's one-to-one of like you checking in with like that department head on what the status of the project is, but they might have 3 or 4 other people in their department that they're working on this project with, or even across other departments. And then that conversation only happened between you and that person. Yep. And so a lot of stuff I was finding, or we were finding, was getting lost just in translation and not the information like wasn't getting disseminated down to where I needed to go. But now that we've moved everything into Asana, we've been able to, and of course you can use Slack. If there's a ton of back and forth and you can tell there's confusion and there's no clarity, it's like, great, let's talk about it real quick or hop on a quick call, get the clarity we need to move it forward. And then we just put the update in Asana on the project to make sure that, it's documented. There's a paper trail in a sense, being completely digital. Like this is our paper trail of who's working on what, who's putting updates, what's the status, what's the outcome that happened from that conversation or from that meeting. And then what are the next steps? What's the next thing that has to happen? And then Asana is also really great because you can assign the due date, you can assign the owner, you can loop in multiple people, and then they can go back and view, like say someone gets looped in last minute and they need to get caught up, they can just go and look at all the comments, look at all the subtasks, get caught up real quick with the description of the project, get caught up to speed, and then they're good to go. Yeah.
And it also helps because we are running multiple companies, it's really easy to forget what we said like a month ago.
I'm finding that more and more now.
Yeah.
I forget. So I feel like I'm losing my mind most days.
Yeah.
Really. I'm like, I don't remember what was said. I don't know what that decision was.
I'm the same way. Like we would have one-on-ones and we talk about, this is where also one-on-ones become sticky, where we need to make sure, this is where we use our EA as well, where you need to take really good notes on these meetings, because if you're doing a one-on-one with a leader and you're talking about moving something forward, I make the assumption, and this is where I fall short, is I've made the assumption a lot in the past where we talked about something and that person is then going to go either into Asana or going to communicate those changes to everyone. Problem is that sometimes doesn't happen. And then when that doesn't happen, then there's a letdown. Then those things aren't actually moving forward. And then we roll back and we kind of check on the status of those and they're not moving forward.
Yep.
So that's really frustrating as a leader. And it's frustrating for the entire team because they're thinking, great, we're going to move these projects forward, but then they don't have absolute clarity on when it should move forward, how it should be done, and how to get things done. Now we have some leaders where we can just be like, cool, we need to go do this. And in certain aspects of the business, they can go and do that. And then they will take it, lead it, go for it, and they'll run with it and they'll make it happen. But there are other things that involve multiple departments, which at this point in the business, we're really dabbling in things. I would say 95% of the things that we're doing involve 2 to 3 departments at minimum.
Yep.
Because like for me, if I'm going to work with the marketing team, if we're going to do a new offer, the marketing team has to build it. So there's multiple shareholders, stakeholders in that conversation. IT has to be a part of it to capture the data on the back end. So marketing, IT, marketing automations. Then there's the sales team that has to be updated. Then the customer service. If we change an offer, customer service, coaching team has to be updated. And then if there's a hiring need for that, then HR has to be updated on this. And they
new
all have
agreements.
To be, new agreements, new everything. So there's a lot of...
Pretty much every department is involved in that type of decision.
Pretty much, which is frustrating if you want to move really fast, but at the same time, it's needed. And then there's other times when we want to do something brand new and then we have to involve legal, which then slows it down a ton because we have to check with legal on any contracts or anything that's happening. But you have to do that. Well, especially at this level too, that's the stuff that comes back to you. Is when you like move too fast and you skip steps to just try to get something out without having to make sure that, legally this is the structure that it's supposed to look like. Yep. And it makes planning so important.
Yeah.
What we've noticed, especially since we've taken over since 2022, early beginning of 2022, when we took over, every strategic meeting we've narrowed down and done less and less and less. And it still is hard because there's so many things that we could do, but we have to take into account what are the resources that it's going to take to get this done? What are we currently doing? And the thing that I'm learning, and this is a lesson for anyone that's listening to this, if you're a leader, especially with multiple stakeholders or shareholders involved in lots of different projects, you have to understand what their workload is like at the current moment, because you have to foresee what are all the small things that are going to come up with that person in their role. Good example of this is IT. We're pretty low staffed on the IT side. And if we want to move something forward, whether it's marketing automations, whether it's new funnels, new offers, new systems on the back end, or we're working on something on the PL side, we have to understand what are they currently working on and how much time do they have available, because we can't throw something new at them when they're still in the midst of a project right now. And it's really just about planning. It really comes down to correct planning.
And I also think kind of going back to the one-on-one thing too, at the executive level, even at the strategic level, a lot of one-on-ones now have shifted, which has been an interesting, I had a really hard time with the initial transition between when, Alex and Layla were, still the CEOs of the company. That's who you and I each reported to. And we were like the doers of the business for the most part. It's like they would have a project idea and we would be mostly like, we had a team too, but like we did a lot of things too. And so it was transitioning into, we have to work through the team a lot more. And I think a lot of one-on-ones, I used to be very tactical in my one-on-ones. It was like, okay, here's my list of things, or you like to reference some direct supports, right? It's like we have a one-on-one with them, like someone that we're leading and managing, and they'll come with a whole list of things that need to get checked off. But really, like those are things that should be in Asana to keep track of the project. And at this level, one-on-ones really should be like coaching opportunities for the most part. Like you really shouldn't be talking about tactical things. And I think as a leader, that's where it's really important. Most people are going to try to always take on more and say they can do it until all of a sudden they can't and they have too much. And so it's really important as a leader that you're pulling that information out of your employees. And usually in a one-on-one setting, like that's where you can use it in a coaching opportunity with them, is trying to help prioritize for them, right? And so something that I think you've done really well over the last couple of quarters is like, okay, prioritize your workload for me. Like we'll get on with one of the executives and we'll be like, what's your workload right now? Like prioritize me, what's top to bottom of importance, right? And like, then we can help figure out, like, does this align with where we're trying to get to as a business? And if not, then we help them reprioritize. And then we figure out where they're being bottlenecked. And that's how we figured out the IT piece right now. Whereas like everything is landing in IT's lap, and each department right now, all of our MITs are being held up because each one is at the ending stage that requires the last bit from IT. And so that's how we kind of figured out, oh, we can't move any of these things forward right now and so then we had to sit down and say, okay, what's the most important thing to the business? Let's prioritize that first. And we have to all align on that as a leadership team, which can definitely be frustrating. I think especially when we're overseeing all entities. So like for us, our portfolio is gains. So like we care about all the entities, but like gains as a whole is important. So whatever is going to have the most impact for gains as a portfolio is usually what we prioritize first, typically. But then, if we have people that are just working in that specific entity and they're being bottlenecked because IT is working on the other entity, it's like they're getting held up because we're focusing on a different entity at the time, which can be really difficult. And so that's why it goes back to just like the planning piece is so important, and making sure as leaders, like you're really helping your leaders in the business to prioritize what their workload is like and pulling out of them like where they need support. And then that's where you have to, that's like where I spend a lot of my time, is figuring out, okay, where do these leaders need support and how can I help alleviate those bottlenecks for them?
Yeah, for sure. And it can be hard sometimes because the leaders want to win in their departments, what they're looking at. And they have these MITs, these like most important tasks that they need to get done for the quarter, for the year. And they want to win. Like we have a team of individuals that want to win. And it can be hard when we have to go to them and have a conversation of, this is going to have to go on the back burner due to all of the other things that we're doing. But when you have a conversation and you explain it to them, they all understand. But it can be very difficult. And sometimes they can feel a little bit handcuffed sometimes. Yeah. And there are times when you have to do that and it's a hard call. But it's super important as a leader to understand and see the whole picture of the business and understand what you need to say no to and what you need to say yes to. But you can't do that unless you have a full view of the business, which is why using a project management system is really, really key. And these one-on-ones are really key, as well as the weekly meetings.
Yeah.
I think there's some people that are like, why do you have these long meetings? Why do you have all these days? And you mentioned this literally yesterday, I think. And we were talking about, I made the point where I hadn't hopped on a marketing huddle in a little bit. And I hopped on the marketing huddle and I realized I need to be more involved in those. And then I hopped on a call with our agency that's running our ads on the gym launch side. And I realized, okay, not only do I don't have to be on this all the time, but I definitely need to hop in probably once a month to make sure, like, what are we doing? Is it the right thing moving forward? And you made the comment, it's like, you need to just be on meetings. Like you should stop doing all the things, which I can't right now. I'm in a position now where unfortunately there are a lot of tactical things I still need to do, which I'm totally cool with because I actually like doing that. That's more the doer side of me. But I do need to just basically be in meetings and talk to people and understand where are we as a business? What are you working on? Why are we working on that? Why is that important? How does that affect the rest of the business? How does that affect the other departments? How does that affect our client experience? How does that affect everything that we're doing to reach our goals? And just keep a pulse on it. And also be there to let the team know that they're doing a great job, or remind them, or hold them accountable, whatever that is, just to show face and be there and integrate it into each department. It's not easy though. I hate being on meetings, to be frank. Like that's also why I was a terrible sales manager though. I hated being on meetings. So I try to keep them as short as possible and get off and then do more.
You'd rather be super tactical.
Yeah. I'd rather just be super tactical. So I hated all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But as a CEO, you can't do that. You have to be somebody different. You have to show up differently for the team, and you have to be there. And I think the team responds more when we're on meetings, and I think they are more productive. But one of the things that's really interesting though, is that using this and keeping, for both of us, I've noticed we've done a much better job inside of meetings since really the last quarter.
Yes.
Or 2 quarters of getting it back on track. Because a lot of times meetings will go well over, or you'll waste all of the time. You'll have an hour-long meeting when it could have just been a 5-minute meeting.
Yep.
And the real thing that we have to figure out is, what's the problem we're trying to solve? Who can solve it? How are they going to solve it? And when are they going to solve it by?
Yep.
And once you get those nailed down, it can be very, very fast. And then upload it in Asana, have all the task notes in there, make sure there's a deadline, and make sure people are tracking it moving forward. They mark the task when it's complete, make sure they hit their deadline, and make sure they just do the basics.
Yep.
That's really it.
Yeah, I think, and that's where we've done a much better job this quarter, I think, of making sure everyone is in Asana. And then it's really important, like as a top level, like I was always one that pushed Asana, and like always, like I would document like everybody's notes in there, update tasks, for other departments, but then just hindered everybody else using it. And you didn't really even get in there until like the last couple of weeks when you realize, oh, I can't keep track of everything because there's so much going on. And we have a lot of leaders, and we have a lot of high level individuals now too, that are actually pushing things forward, which is great. And they need a lot of stuff, either needs your review or my review. And so, we have to get everything in there. And so I think just if you're going to use a project management tool for your company, like you have to go all in on it. Otherwise it's not going to be used. And so something that you've done a really good job at more recently is like after we've had a conversation, whether it's on a call or in Slack, you're like, okay, great. Can you like ask that person, can you please go put this in Asana? Can you update Asana? Can you make sure you add a task to this project? Because this is a new thing that we might have missed when we originally set the goal that we know now has to get done. So can we please make sure we get it updated so that way we don't forget that we have to do this one thing to continue to push this forward. And then that's really helped on our leadership meetings that used to go, as an example, our gym launch strategic meeting used to be 90 minutes every Monday. And just like out of necessity for time with the other 2 entities, like we had to move it to 60 minutes. And then sometimes we get off 10 minutes early. Mm-hmm. It's like we've been so efficient this quarter because now we pull up Asana, we have an agenda for the meeting. So we do like the first thing that we'll run through like any major announcements or updates for all of the entities. So that way all of the leaders have an understanding of what's going on. So like as an example, this last week, Prestige Labs, we had a really big national challenge that just kicked off. So like that was top of mind for everyone in the company because we have affiliates that are gym launch clients. And we wanted them to understand that. They track their supplement sales within the Gym Dash software. And so like, it's just really important that all of our leaders have an understanding of like big things going on in the company. And so we'll do major announcements or updates. That way everybody's aware of it. And then we'll do any like open positions just to make everyone's up to speed on like any hiring that we have going on, who the hiring manager is. That way, that was also something I was finding like we just recently kind of figured out. I'm like, oh, we're like posting positions. I like didn't even know we had a job posted. Right. And I was like, okay, well, can I see the job description for this? And then, they were okay, but some of them need a little work or guidance because it was somebody's first time ever writing a job description. Right. And so like, okay, I need to dive in there a little bit. So we just, made it open for everybody. Like, here's the positions we're hiring for, put a new process in place. That way everybody, knows what's up. Anybody that's going to be out of office. And then we do top of mind for each entity. Right. And then those are specific where it's like, and they've all been things this quarter that were bottlenecks to moving MITs forward, which is great. Like those are the things that we should be talking about on a weekly basis, especially on a Monday. Cause like, let's figure out how to solve this so you can continue to move forward for the week. And so I think we've done a really good job this quarter specifically of like keeping everything top of mind that needs to be top of mind within our project board for the quarter for each entity, and then only talking about those things in the meetings has kept us like really efficient on task and allowed us to not waste any time and even get done some meetings early, which never used to happen.
For sure. And this would be for anyone that if you're running just your own business or you're looking to scale, or maybe you're new into it, because we're new, we're still learning. We're always learning constantly. And there's lots of resources out there on how to be a better manager. But when you're doing this, just remember, you never want to use up time just to use up time. Try to minimize as many meetings as you possibly can. Most meetings, 90% of meetings, are a waste of time. Use written word for project-based things or ideas. If someone has an idea, make them write out their idea. Like, what's the problem? Here's how I think we can solve it. Put together a proposal. Yeah, put together an actual proposal before you ever meet about it. And then meet after the proposal is done and allow people to review it and then discuss it.
Yep.
That's what Jeff Bezos would do. A bunch of other very well-known CEOs would do as well. But it helps make sure that people can, number one, write effectively and communicate effectively. And if the proposal is sent in and it's not something that needs to be changed, then you don't have to waste the time of having a meeting. You can read it and be like, this isn't worth meeting about. Or you can put comments on it. We use Google Docs. You can comment on it. You can work through the project. You can go through it, ask questions. And then if you need to meet on it, you can. But sometimes you don't have to. But the goal is, as a leader, try to eliminate as many meetings as you possibly can so that you can be more efficient, because your team really wants to work. They don't want to just, good players don't want to just sit on meetings. They don't want to. I don't want to sit on meetings, but I have to. But the good A players, they don't want to. They want to be working. They want to be either working with the clients, selling, building marketing funnels, testing stuff, working internally with the team members on certain aspects, whether it's HR, whatever, building out systems, processes, IT, working on the systems to make them more efficient, all those things. They don't want to be sitting on meetings. So try to minimize that as much as possible.
Yeah. And then when you do have meetings, there needs to be an agenda, right, always, for that meeting. What's the purpose of the meeting? What's the goal outcome? Is it to, so like some of these weekly meetings, we have department weekly meetings for each department within the entities, but it's like the goal of that is reviewing what were the KPIs from the previous week. Were any of them off track? If they were, great, let's talk about why they were off track. Like, let's say it's sales and the closing percentage wasn't where it needed to be. It's like, great, well, what happened? Let's talk about that. Like, that's a bottleneck right now. Because if we go 2, 3, 4 weeks of not having our closing percentage not being where it needs to be, that affects our bookings. It affects, it's just a down, it's a trickle down of effect to the business. So I think it's just really important, if you're going to have meetings, it needs to be like, what's the outcome of the meeting? Is it to make a decision on a project? Is it to rally the team together for the week? Like, what is the goal or the point? Because you can have meetings for all these things, but just being clear about what this specific meeting is for and having the right people on it with an agenda, it'll just make it super effective for anybody that's on it.
And the person that sets the meeting has to own the agenda. They have to be the one to create the actual agenda. So if they're the one that called it, they need to come prepared with the agenda. This is the problem, or this is what I want to get done. This is any written documents about it or any proof that they have about it. They need to come prepared with it.
Yep.
And have either attached it to the Google Calendar, so it's notes that are involved with it, so that people can see the project right there, or it's in Asana with a link to Asana, the project.
Yep.
One of the things that helps us a ton is we have an executive assistant. She's awesome. And she helps us manage our calendars across the board, as well as tons of little tasks that we do. So she handles all the travel, all of our scheduling that we have on our calendars. Anyone that wants to get on my calendar, they have to go through her, including internal teams. Like, they have to. The only time it doesn't happen is if I set it on my calendar myself for a one-off conversation. Which
happens sometimes. I look at your calendar.
It definitely happens.
And you don't have anything on there, but I hear you in here talking.
Yep,
I'm like, who's he talking to?
Yeah. Ideas. I like to talk about big ideas. But yeah, having an amazing EA helps a ton. And we're fortunate enough to have one that lives locally and can help us with a ton of things, both personally. She manages, she has access to all our credit cards, bank account, travel, you name it. So she has access to all that. So if we need to book something or we need to schedule something, she has access to that. She knows where our favorite places to go, how literally down to the seat that I want to sit in when we fly. Everything. Bougie, but
so bougie.
I can't sit in the middle. That's it. I don't have to be first class, but I can't be in the middle seat.
No, I'm always in the middle seat.
Yes.
Because it's the two of us.
Yep. Because you're smaller.
If we don't have first class, yeah.
That's it.
Cool. I think that's all I've got.
I don't know. But if you're a leader and you're struggling, maybe you're managing multiple businesses, first is take a step back and should you be managing multiple businesses? And if you do need to, just make sure that you use a project management system to stay on track, because organization is the key at that point, at that level, the level that we're at. We have to stay organized. We have to have clarity into everything, have to have oversight and the ability to review what's happening. And we're kind of in a transition period where we have leaders that are stepping up more and more, and they're still learning, just like we are, but they're learning within their own positions. And so a lot of the stuff that we have to do right now is review and just give feedback. Hey, tweak this. Hey, do this, tweak this. This isn't good. This is great. Great job. We have to do that. Over time, we won't have to do that as much, but that's probably a year or 2 years out.
Yep.
So just make sure you guys do that. Love you.
Love you too.